Hi everyone. In this video we're going to take a look at sessions and storing data on the server side of things as opposed to cookies which store data on the client side of things. And so we'll be looking at the really cool stuff we can do with sessions and the session object. Now, in the previous video we had looked at cookies, and so there's a really important cookie that is basically created by default by our Java web applications. And that cookie is called JSessionID, and it has some wild, crazy value. This is a really important cookie in working with sessions. So again, sessions are very similar to cookies in that they store data. They're a little nicer to use because you can store objects into them, and so instead of just strings, we could store whatever we want. However, to work with sessions, we need to have cookies enabled in the web browser so that we can create this session ID. For instance, if I was using the same website as another user at the same time, we need to differentiate who's using the server. So when the servlet runs, it has no idea if Steve's using that servlet, if you're using that servlet, if my wife's using that servlet, it has no idea. Again, HTTP protocol is not going to remember that for us. And so what we do is we stick this little hidden cookie on the client side, and that's a unique number that identifies this computer. And if my wife was using the same servlet, she would have a different JSession ID number here. And again, this is just a unique number that's transmitted to our servlet that helps tell us which session we're on. So again, you could kind of imagine, and even hackers do this, that if we had the same JSession ID, you could hijack somebody else's session, known as session hijacking. Again, I'm not going to show you how to do that. The other good news about this JSession ID is that typically each time users log in, they're given a new session ID value. So again, all a JSession ID is just a cookie that has a unique number for each user's computer to help identify the different users. Just like a CVTC ID number, it's just a unique number for each computer, for each student. Same idea, same idea. Again, per the previous video I've already gone ahead and created a session.jsp page, which just contains, right now, a simple H1. Again, I did this to save some time. And then again, in my source code, for my Java source code that is, I've gone ahead and I've created a session servlet. And there's not much going on with it right now. And I've also added that session servlet. I lied, I have not added that session servlet. I'll go ahead and add it right now. And here I was trying to save some time and I totally forgot. Well. So we'll add a session servlet, another servlet element. We'll give it the name session servlet. And then we'll map it real quickly. Session servlet is what we want to map, and we'll map that to /session servlet. Say that 3 times fast. Okay. Again, we're going to be working with the session object and storing data server side as opposed to a client side. So I'm just going to expand these windows so it's a little easier to read. Okay. To get the session for the current user, we pull it out of the request object. Again, there is a unique identifier, that number that we saw here, this JSession ID with this wild, crazy value, that matches up for our request object. So what we can do is it's an HttpSession class, and I'm going to make a session object equal to request.getSession. And this will grab the session for the current user. Again, make sure you import the proper classes that you need. It is also recommended that you pass in a Boolean for true. So we will make the session if it does not exist. If it does, we'll go ahead and use the current session object. So that's why we set it to true here. Now, be extremely careful. Do not make this session a class variable. Do not do that. It is not thread safe, and it is very dangerous to do that. For instance, I could serve up somebody else's session instead of theirs, and so that could be extremely dangerous, so never do that. Again, we pull the session out of the current request. Again, the Apache code is doing very useful stuff for us, and so it's matching up that unique identifier that comes from the cookie to the session that's being stored on the server and then giving us the right one. All under the hood, we don't have to worry about it. We just do get session, and we can move forward knowing we got that session. So again, request.getSession true will get the current session if there is one, otherwise it will make one for us. And then we can use that session very similar to using request parameters. So for instance, request attributes. We had request attributes where we could set them, like set attribute, and you would do something like attribute name, and then you could set an attribute value, like so. We can do the same thing, but with sessions. Very similar idea. You would do something like session dot set attribute. Set the attribute name. I'm going to go ahead and call it message. And I'm going to set a welcome message, like so. So again, same idea. It's setting attributes, except this is a session attribute instead. So I'm going to delete this request attribute for now. Okay. And then we can access this in our JSP file. Just like before, you can use expression language and JSTL. I've imported JSTL here in case I need it to access that welcome message. But I'm going to take it one step further. I just want to prove that sessions actually remember are stored on server side. So I'm going to go ahead, comment this out, and I'm going to say if the session is new. So if it's a new session, if this is a brand new session, we're going to set a session attribute called message, and we'll say welcome. If this is not a new session, we are going to say welcome back. Welcome back. There we are. Now what I'm going to do is, of course, I've got a forward user somewhere, so I'm going to say request.getRequestDispatcher. And I'm going to forward users to that session JSP file that I had made before. So /webinf is in a JSP folder, and the name of the file, session.jsp. And we'll make sure to forward that JSP, our request object, and our response object. There we are. Okay. Now on the session side, the JSP side of things, sorry, I can go ahead and access that session object, and to do so, I'm going to make an h2 element, and I'm just going to quickly type some expression language here to access that session, that attribute that we had created. And so I believe the way you do this is with session scope.message. I'm doubting myself. I don't think this is correct. I'm going to go ahead and click play. We'll see where we get. Try session servlet. There we are. So you can see we've got the welcome message. Because this is the first time we're running this, this session is brand new. It's the first time we're running this code. Now, theoretically, if I click the replay button, it says welcome back. And so we've remembered that we have this session here on the server side of things. Now I think even if I shut down the server, I think, this may not be true, but I think it'll be remembered even if I restart the server. So let's see, if I do this, it appears to be working. So if I close it just to make sure and I click play, it does say welcome back. So again, that data persists even if the server closes down. And so that's really nice. That's really nice. Again, just like cookies, we can also set an expiration for our sessions, and indeed it is strongly recommended that you do so. If you do not, that will essentially create a memory leak, and eventually you'll run out of memory because you'll be creating a session each time the user logs on, and for each user you'll be creating this session and they'll never ever go away. So what we can do, there's a couple ways we can set that. What I might recommend doing is going into WebXML, and we can set the session there. And we do so with a session-config element. And in that session config element, we can specify a session timeout element, in which you just specify what the timeout is of that session is in minutes. So I'm going to set 1 minute. Typically, you might want to make the session a bit longer. I think, for instance, on E360, it might be like 15 minutes. Or maybe longer or less, depending on how much security you want. So again, when this session is made, it immediately kicks off a timer. If we hit that 1 minute timer, that session will be invalidated and it'll be thrown away. Now, each time the user accesses the session, so each time we run this code and we get that session object for that user and we use it, that timer is reset. So it's reset automatically for us. Again, don't let sessions, make sure you make them expire. It's really important. It really is. So that's the big one with sessions. Again, sessions are similar to cookies. However, we can actually store other stuff in sessions because we have access to set attribute. Again, the first argument is the attribute name. However, the second argument can be any object you want. It could be a Java bean, it could be a string, a boolean, a number, whatever. And so it makes them a little nicer to work with than cookies. So again, there's really not too much to sessions. Again, you can pull out a session from the request object using getSession and then true to make the session object if it does not exist. Session.isNew will let you know if it's a new session or not. And we can set attributes and get attributes just like the request set and get attribute methods that you've been using before. And then finally, you can actually set a session timeout. And it's strongly recommended you set that. 15 minutes is pretty standard for a session timeout. That might be pretty safe as a good go-to number. Again, unlike cookies where you wouldn't want to store like the username and password, sessions are really useful for storing which user is logged in and that sort of thing. You would not want to store like a hey, you've logged in successfully equal to true cookie, because I could change that on client side and I could hack through your website very easily. So really that's about it for working with sessions. In the next video, we're going to show you how to make a very simple login page and a welcome page. So it is not the most secure login and welcome page, but gets the idea across of how to use sessions. Okay, thanks for watching.